Okay, so as you can see, we have a family of bikes here, and a lot of these bikes are bikes that kind of have a history to them. They have kind of a backstory to them, but I'm going to go over it real quickly. So me personally, I've been into biking for a while. I probably say going on 30 years I've been into biking. So my big thing with a bike is I want my bike to have good components on it. I want it to be able to accomplish the task I'm looking for, but at the same time, I don't like to feel like I've overspent. Let me go over 3 bikes that I still have that I've had for a while, and I've had other bikes in between that I've gotten rid of. I had a different Trek full suspension EX8 for a while. Then I recently upgraded to this Santa Cruz Hightower. This thing is really cool, but one of the bikes that I've had forever and I've just stuck with for a long time is this Rally. This has 26-inch wheels on it. This is a really cool bike. It has a Marzocchi front suspension on it. That front shock has been on there for a long time. It really has. I've had this set up for probably 20 years, and everything has been stripped off of this and modified over that period of time, and I just can't bring myself to get rid of it because I absolutely love the frame. Now, the geometry of this bike is definitely not what I would consider a modern geometry, but it is still a really fun hardtail to ride. It's got full XD components. It's been upgraded time and time again. And this is just a bike that I've absolutely loved forever. This bike has just been awesome, but I don't really ride it much anymore. And I really reserve riding it to scenarios where I just want the nostalgia of getting back on that bike. The next bike that I've kept is this Trek. This is an Excalibur 8. This is a really cool bike, actually. It's a hardtail, of course. It's got the G2 geometry to it, so it's a bit more of a modern geometry to it. It's also been fully upgraded, so all of the SRAM gear that came on this bike is gone. It's all been replaced with XT, so everything on here is pretty much either XT, Race Face, Cane Creek for the headset. It's got a Judy front shock on it with remote lockout. This is really cool. It's running Easton handlebar with Easton grips on it. And it's just been a really, really solid bike. But ever since going to full suspension, I really don't ride this one very much. My newest bike is the one that a lot of you may have seen, and that's this new Santa Cruz Hightower CC. So this is a full carbon frame, and it is their lighter carbon. It has a Fox 36. I have it set to 150 millimeter front travel, 150 rear travel. It runs all XO1 SRAM drive components. It has carbon handlebars, carbon crank. I have a dropper post on it. I'm running E13 tires, and I've never ran E13 equipment ever before this bike, and this is my first experience with it, and I'm kind of interested to see how it holds up. I'm running 800 millimeter wide handlebars, so it's a little wider than I'm used to. I typically run about 760, so 800 is definitely on the wider side. Whenever I'm doing basic trail riding, I have my normal phone clamp there, but I take that off if I'm going to hit anything extreme. This is going to be my go-to bike from now on. Now, I have several other bikes here, and I know I asked the question a long time ago what people felt about price points and how much you feel you should spend for a good beginner mountain bike. Well, fortunately, I have a couple very beginner mountain bikes up to a couple moderate mountain bikes. Now, these are all hardtails, but this one right here I actually built for my daughter. This is a Dawes Haymaker. I believe I got this off of a bicycle website, and the reason why I got this is because the frame fit her. Now, I have let her experiment with every type of seat you could imagine, and she settled on this one. It's way too large, clumpy, and cushy for my taste, but she loves it, and it gets her on the bike. She's riding the bike a lot, and that is a really good thing. Now, what I did was I took all the SRAM components that came on my Trek, my Excalibur 8, and this is about a $1,300 bike as it sits stock. Right now, it's been highly modified. It's probably up to about $2,500 total in terms of the bike plus all the equipment that's been swapped out on it. Well, anyways, I took the SRAM gear off of that and I threw it all on this bike. I also upgraded the headset, the stem, the handlebars, the grips. The brakes are now hydraulic. They were mechanical when I got the bike. I put a really cheap suspension seat post that I've actually had for a long time in this bike. And we put a RockShox, kind of a basic fork up front with a lockout on it. She absolutely loves this bike. We're running Rapid Robs up front and the back, and it's a really nice bike. Moving on, so this Giant is a new bike to the fleet and family, and this is actually a gift that I got for my good friend Brian, who rides this bike. This is a really nice bike. It's brand new, so this is a 2020 model Giant, and this is the Talon 3. So this is about a $650 bike. It's about half the price of the Trek Excalibur 8. There's a lot of really cool things about this bike, but more importantly, it feels really solid and it feels like it's well constructed. This is a bike shop bike. You're not going to find this at Walmart. You're not going to find this at most sporting goods stores. This is something that would be more on the entry-level line of what a bike shop might sell. It's about $100 more than what the lowest cost bikes that most bike shops would sell would be. This is a nice bike. And a few upgrades have been done to it, but very few at this point. I believe just grips and maybe pedals. But aside from that, the bike actually performs really well. It is comfortable to ride. I've ridden it a few times, and it's holding up really well. This bike is used daily, and it goes about 10 miles a day. So over trails, and like I said, it's been holding up really well. But the difference between something like this and what you see way down here at the end, which this is a Target purchase bike. So this bike right here was a $200 bike from Target a long time ago, and this bike was actually purchased for my wife initially when she thought she might want to get into biking, but we didn't want to spend a lot of money on something that she might not use. So this bike is now kind of turned into the, when you have a friend over and they don't know anything about biking and they need a bike to sit on, that's really what that's used for. Now what's interesting about this bike is that I took all the gear that came on this bike off and I put it on that bike. So everything that I took off of that bike, from a drivetrain perspective, from a crank, from the rear cassette, the derailleur, everything is now on this bike, except for the front shock, which is the factory shock that was on here. One of the reasons for that is I didn't feel like investing in higher end wheels and tires with hubs that would support disc brakes, so I have to stay with the cantilever brake system that's on here, and you know, it works. So this is a basic system. It's still an aluminum frame, put a much nicer end handlebar. So these are the handlebars that actually came off of this Trek. The grips are also the grips that came off of this Trek. The seat is just an extra seat that we had laying around. That seat's actually off of an e-bike. But that bike is for, again, folks that come over, maybe kids, if you have somebody who needs to ride a bike and you don't want to put them in a bike that actually belongs to somebody. So that bike is kind of used for that. Now, this bike right here is a very interesting addition. This is now my wife's new bike. Finding a mountain bike that would be the right size for her was nearly impossible, simply because this is actually a youth bike. So my wife's not tall, and she needs a bike that's comfortable for her. And unfortunately, I went to all the bike shops and we couldn't find anything. So I started looking all over the internet, and I came across a brand that people are going to hate the minute I say it, but fit the bill perfectly. This is a Mongoose, and this is a relatively high-end Mongoose in terms of their mountain bikes. This specific one is not sold in any stores. This specific one has hydraulic disc brakes. It has an SR Suntour front lockout shock, which is really cool. Doesn't have the little flimsy bridge across the top of it. It's nice and strong. It runs the Atlas and the Acera, which is interesting because it actually has many of the same components that come on this Giant, which is really cool. These are 24-inch wheels and tires, so these are very, very short, but it fits my wife comfortably, and she loves riding this bike. And because of that, we get out on the trails more. I'm upgrading this bike slowly, gonna throw a new handlebar on, new stem, might even replace the front shock. I'll probably end up doing quite a bit of work to this bike before it's done. But the frame size, the wheel and tire size is perfect for her height, and it gets her on the bike, and that's really what matters. So ultimately, at the end of the day, when you look at the range of what these bikes are valued at, or at least the amount of money that goes into them, you're talking $200. You're talking up to, that bike when it was brand new was about a $700 frame. Everything added to it, that bike at the time was probably valued close to about $1,500. You look at the next in line would definitely be this bike. MSRP on this bike was $700. Right, $700 for a Mongoose. That's probably why it had decent entry-level equipment on it. Then you would jump up to probably the Dawes. So this one, because of all the upgrades, is probably about an $800 to $1,000 bike. When it was purchased, I think it was like a $600 bike. So stripping everything off, putting all the other stuff on it, about $800 to $1,000. Move up to the Giant, $650 bike new. Technically would be a step up in terms of the components and the geometry of it. Moving up to the Trek, the Excalibur 8. This one, as it sits, like I said, is probably worth about $2,500, maybe even a little bit more. The drivetrain, the upgrades to it, the crank, everything on this definitely made the price skyrocket from its original $1,300 price tag. And then moving to my new Santa Cruz, that bike right there, depending on where you get it, how you get it, is going to be between $5,000 and $7,000. So this specific bike is my new bike. I absolutely love it. So across the line, you can see that we own just about every type of bike, but all these bikes right here kind of represent different riding styles and different skill levels and different goals, right? My bike is what I call Spider Mountain build. This bike for me is designed for relatively extreme biking, whereas the rest of these really aren't designed for that and really couldn't handle it. That's kind of the big difference. So when you have all these different bikes, they might meet different needs for different people. If you're just going to be riding around a neighborhood with no real inclines, flat land, nothing really rough, nothing that's really going to jostle it very much, you could get away with a $200 Walmart bike. Anybody who tells you different is probably not telling you the truth. Now, how long that bike's going to last is going to also depend on how much you take care of it, as well as where in that Walmart price range you're looking at. If you're looking at an $80 bike, it's going to rust out pretty quickly. It's probably going to start failing. If you look in the $150 price point, same thing. When you bump up to the $200 price point and beyond, that's really where you're in the price range that you can get a bike that will probably last you a long time if it's never subjected to anything beyond road riding, beyond basic riding. Also, your body physique really matters. How heavy you are, how hard you pedal, where you're positioned on the bike, how much force you're putting on it. All those also matter in terms of how long the chain's going to last, how long your crank is going to last, how long different components are going to last on your bike, including your tires and other things. So all of that factors into it. But what I wanted to show you here is, even though a lot of people will claim that you have to spend over $3,000 to have a quality bike, or you have to spend over $1,000, that's not necessarily true. You can take a bike with a relatively good frame that might cost $450, and you can upgrade it over time that probably has a total of $1,000 in terms of investment into it, and have a bike that'll last you a long time and that you'll have a lot of fun on. In my opinion, it doesn't make sense for people who are just getting into it, who may not even like biking, to get a grossly expensive bike that's just going to sit and never get used. Anyways, guys, I just wanted to give you a quick overview of my fleet of bikes, and this doesn't include 2 e-bikes that I have as well, but I'm going to talk more about these, but I'm going to get onto a project today, and that project is going to allow me to carry these bikes, or at least the ones that we take out, safer and a more secure fashion in my truck. So hang tight to the next video. Now's a great time to subscribe.